So we got a really exciting panel on globalists versus sovereignists. I'm interested to hear about what is really the position on the tech they're building, also like personally, which side are you picking? So Emmanuel, as spicy as we can.
Thank you for coming today. My name is Mono, and I'm a technical writer, researcher focused on like Ethereum tech. You can go and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Illia. I'm co-founder of Near Protocol, and I guess to start, I'm a pro-sovereign globalist. Just to break the mental model of this as being versus. So,
yeah, I'm Adrian. I'm one of the co-founders of Anoma. I agree. People should be capable of picking their own security model as they see fit.
So that makes you a sovereignist.
I'd say I'm a sovereignist.
Okay.
As a globalist.
Okay.
I'm Ethan, co-founder of Cosmos, now working on something called Cycles. I guess I would say I'm a sovereignist.
Okay, so we have.
seems like there's a fight here. Yeah?
But perhaps
there's
I could
some
be
ganging up
convinced
happening.
of...
Okay. So so I'm like a globalist too.
Uh-huh.
So.
And what does that mean to you?
Means there's one thing in the middle, and then we can all like concentrate around it, and like the whole is stronger because you have like multiple connected to it, and you don't have to like go alone. So I think that's something I like get into, but like I feel like there's more, because like sovereignty is this thing where we like say, oh, it's good for us to like be a power and like choose our stuff, but sometimes there's benefit to us being connected to the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the European Union is like an example. The US itself is an example. I think I was having this conversation with someone on like, the US is not really one country. It's like 20 different states all doing this stuff, but like there's one united front, and like that united front can like, it's power that can be used for good. So like that's like my mental model.
Under this model of globalism, I agree. I think, like when I think like the extremes of globalism are really a one world government, and I think no one really wants a one world government, and so.
But we kind of, I mean, UN is one world government.
We have a very limited one.
Yeah.
World, like very like rather thin.
But you can imagine that, and then we have city-states, which are the like individual units of governance. And you just unite them with the network.
Yes, if we want to have a super thin global layer, I think this should happen at the interoperability layer and more the standard side on like how do sovereign systems interact with each other. On especially the states, since I'm from Switzerland, or I'm not yet from Switzerland.
But you will be in the future from Switzerland.
Let's see. I actually really like the idea that you can have like a federal system where if certain communities want a checkpoint into it, then they should, right? Like I think this is, but I don't think the entire world should look like this, where we all have to checkpoint into exactly the same model.
Yeah.
But don't you want eventual consistency on that checkpointing, even on the level of the Switzerland?
No.
Right? Like you want everyone to be like at some point aware of what's happening in that village in the mountains.
Yes, you want this within Switzerland. So like this is how I think on like L2s, for example. Like Switzerland is effectively like an L1 with a couple of L2s hanging, like 26 L2s hanging off of it, right? But there are many more countries that I don't think.
But why is that not the same principle? Like it's one planet. We share the same resources. We share the same.
There's a bit of a false dichotomy here,
Yeah.
because there's a question of scale, right? And you have different scales at which you need different kinds of political structures, right? And so it's more about the scale at which sovereignty can be expected to be expressed, right? Ultimately, like you're saying, we're all fundamentally limited by the biophysical reality of the planet. Maybe some people here on the panel or in the audience think we're going to overcome those limits.
Not yet.
Not yet. I personally don't or wouldn't aspire to that.
That's something I think we can get into. So this sense of like what limits do we face, and how like is it really practical to work towards trying to like overcome those limits, or like are those resources better spent elsewhere? Like especially like in the context of say something like decentralized AI that like it is involved in, like this sense of we need to like put everything on the blockchain and stuff. Like there's inefficiencies there. So like should we try to solve these inefficiencies, or like are we better off doing something else? Like that's something I would like to hear.
I mean that is a different topic, but yeah, we
Yeah, but
definitely
like,
should
yeah,
not.
sure,
We
sure.
definitely should not put everything on chain. I think that like everybody agrees with that. I hope at this point. I think we're way past 2017 where we're like, let's put everything on chain. This is
Every single
solution.
message must be globally ordered in
Yeah.
consensus.
Yeah, so I think
Yeah.
like the blockchains are useful for a set of core functionalities, right? This is identity, this is payments, this is marketplaces, price discovery, kind of that type of functionality.
What
Everything.
else is there in life?
Yeah, I mean at the end, everything in life is a marketplace, right?
I would add to this, they're useful for coordination. For
Well,
people that...
marketplace is a coordination mechanism.
Yeah, coordination is like the meta
But-
meta model.
But I guess
in a sense.
to the topic is, well, if you're building a marketplace, let's, it's 3 use cases, right? Payments, identity, marketplaces, in a very general sense, right? So identity, you want some form of global identity. Because
I'm
that allows
not
you
sure
that
about
allows you
that.
to have an interoperability. The problem is like lack of global identity right now, which is Cosmos is a good example, Layer 2s is a good example, is that you have no way to interoperate without like setting up an identity there, which is different from the
actually-
identity you're using here.
I don't
What's
know.
wrong with
I
that?
think global identity is terrifying. I
Is
think
it
you want
though?
identity that's bootstrappable, like where your identity is dependent on like your social network, your connectivity in the community. But this shouldn't, like, if you want to fully move to Antarctica, you should be allowed to bootstrap a fully new identity. And I think this is like when I think of when I think of global identity, I think of there's like a registry in charge that assigns you a like unique identifier at birth, and you must carry this with you at all times and show this everywhere. I don't think this is a good idea. Also, for the other reason, like when you think of identity, the strongest people that can provide sort of guarantees over my identity are the people I grew up with, like my grandparents, and technically actually my grandparents' friends. Because I grew up in a village like 1,500 people, right? Like identity is fundamentally local because it depends on what your local trust graph is.
So my point here is, I mean, let's use like phone numbers, right? Yeah, you have local phone number, and the problem is like it's not interoperable, right? Like if you give me your phone number, local phone number, and I'm in a different country, I cannot connect to you, right? So there is.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, that's why we have a country code, right? That actually bring.
Put in the country code, and then you can call.
Yeah, but
that's
that
like-
is a
that's
global
like the
identity.
point. That's-
That is a global identity.
Well, no,
Literally
it's
a global
sharded,
identity.
but it's sharded, right? Yeah, and a
It is
telephone number
sharded.
is
No,
a global
I'm
identity.
all
and
for
it's-
sharding.
and it's a
Let's be
huge
clear.
and it's a huge problem for me, right? Because scammers from anywhere can call me. I actually don't
Also,
like that.
everyone always think you're pro-American
Yeah.
because you're on the wrong
one.
chart.
But like I can spin up. I have like multiple phone numbers right now, for
Sure,
example, right? So
sure.
like I'm not saying that global identity means
Needs
you
to
have
be
one
singular,
identity.
fair.
Yeah, you can have as many identities as you want. You can burn them. You can do whatever you want. But the interoperability is requiring a way to see. Like, and again, it can be that we just add a chain prefix, chain name to the address on chain for like practical purposes.
What we do.
We haven't done that.
I fully agree with this. Like agreeing on global standards is generally a good idea. But
Globalization.
so I think we should agree on architectures globally and like standards. This is actually why I like the phone number example, because like it's very convenient that my phone that I bought in Switzerland works in China as well as in the US. Right? But it's not because we have sort of a single security model globally. It's because we agreed on the same cellular backbone protocol.
But I mean, that's literally the protocol. That is
Yeah.
that is what it's like. That is the protocol. That's what we built in.
No,
It's a global protocol that everybody follows.
No,
You have different implementations. You have different, indeed, like China may be like spying on you at all times if you don't have end-to-end encryption. But at the end, it's all like that's just because protocol didn't define end-to-end encryption. If it did, it would have, it would have the same security.
I think to a large extent, this is sort of. I think when people think global security models are like, if we want to be the single most decentralized thing, they always think of a thing you can interact with. I agree that globally we should agree on protocols. But generally, this doesn't mean that there's a single global chain or a single global consensus. This just means we have a single global protocol definition, like TCP/IP. We all agree that this protocol exists, and like we all implement it in different languages. But there is not a single global server that we must route our packets via.
Yeah, and I mean, I think in blockchain, I hope nobody wants a single server, right? So, and the
Be
protocol.
surprised.
You'd be surprised because a single server and many servers running the same consensus are still a single server.
Let's get to this. So okay, so now we have, we agreed that we want a global protocol for identity, right?
Let's call this a protocol definition. Not it's different. It's like a protocol is written down in text.
Yeah, but
it is not
so is every other, like Cosmos is a protocol.
But this is different than I think what everyone thinks on we don't want to have a global running. We don't want to have a thing. We want to have a text page that describes a global protocol.
But we do need maybe global consensus on what kind of country codes you use. Is that a good example of how globalism helps?
Global standards do help the expression of local sovereignty, right?
But you need global consensus on that?
Probably.
Yeah, you need a table where you have the country codes, right?
And
somebody needs to
and this is to that point
register.
about the relevance of scale, right? It's relevant to have protocols
a global consensus
to run at global scale. Absolutely, it is, right? But that shouldn't be,
the only thing. Yeah, that's
the only thing.
Sovereign
Exactly.
globalism.
And it actually enables the expression of more sovereign, consensus. So I'm happy with that.
One way to
definition,
describe
sovereign globalist,
to describe this. So if you have this one directory of where we all agree on country codes and stuff, and then every country is this signatory to it, it means no one can just change it arbitrarily. Mm-hmm. But then if you had say you had independent countries maintain their own independent list, it's easier to sort of corrupt or compromise the list of each country in isolation versus if all of us are referring to the same bulletin and stuff like that. So that's the trade-off between sovereignty and globalism. Globalism, we can all contribute resources because we're all verifying the same thing. But for sovereignty, we're verifying independently. So how do you see that trade-off?
Yeah, maybe to use a more specific example. Now, let's say we have some global consensus to agree on identity, and now you have local payments, right? So everybody's paying each other. It's all good, super fast, local. And you have countries which, let's say, don't like to follow rules because, maybe they like to steal money sometimes, right? The governments themselves. So whoever runs that, trusted. No. So how do you now verify that they actually following the rules when you settle across this sovereign
you shouldn't.
areas?
So you shouldn't settle across them. This would mean they are central route. The thing that you use, you have to fundamentally understand the trust assumptions, right? So it is fine. For example, in the Switzerland case, I mostly trust my local government, so I'm fine that the local government runs things. But I'm not saying that everyone should settle via the local Swiss instance, right? This is it's really a choice of who do you settle with, and I think users should be very aware of which specific security zone they're actually in.
Well, isn't that too much work?
That may be true. I don't. This works reasonably well in the physical world. In the physical world, you very easily understand what your local trust assumptions are.
It's still difficult though.
Mm-hmm.
It's still difficult. So the thing when debates around say sovereign roll-ups and stuff comes up, it becomes harder to reason about security models. If all of us are settling on Ethereum or using Ethereum for D and all that, we know, so long as Ethereum is live and safe, in principle, without multigs and all of that, my roll-up is safe and live. But with a sovereign thing, and now it's reason about how strong is the community?
Yes, but then if you don't know the community, don't trust them. Don't.
But
that's a trade-off.
The thing is if we all checkpoint into a single global layer, now we have problems, and we have to trust this global layer not to fuck us. This is sort of.
You can participate in it. You can participate. You can
verify. That's the way.
I always think this is why Swiss democracy still works to a large extent nowadays. Is because people are very close to the actual centers of power. Because this is why I like hand voting systems where your local community, 2,000 people meets up in the town square once a year to vote on their next year's tax rate. This is a good system because you as an individual truly understand what your security model is. I do not like the idea that and I think this is to some extent why this doesn't work in the States anymore or in Germany even you need to the further you get away from the actual the more abstractions you have in the middle, the harder it is for individuals to understand them, and the less trust individuals place in these systems. So this is why something like local payments should be settled on a local thing. And I don't I'm not entirely clear why this needs to be checkpointed.
How do you go from there? Let's say I got paid locally and I want to pay for something in another local thing. Right now you need some way.
You need some amount of interoperability, but as IBC proved out, IBC has great point-to-point interoperability without the need for a routing hub.
IBC does. I mean, IBC
Would
still
benefit
requires
from
like
one.
each chain to have like to be very secure. Yes. Like IBC requires like each chain. So like the trust assumptions now.
No, it doesn't. It requires that the chain you're on, you trust it to a sufficient extent, and like secure.
No, but like again, I'm in a local zone. I get paid here, and I want to buy something from another local zone. This local zone is corrupted because it's run by my local government, who is completely corrupted, right? Not a story from real life at all. And so now, like when you're actually sending a transaction, like maybe all of the money you received are actually fake. And there's nothing under the hood. So, like.
Wait, in what sense? Where do you receive
Well,
the money?
you're trying to send money from your local address, right? That's run by your local
Corrupt government.
and those money are like they're not backed by anything anywhere else, right?
Yes, you always have to trust the system that you're on and the system that issued you the asset.
Yeah.
This is just like fundamental. And you're not going to get around this.
But
Like, if you decided to receive money on a corrupted system, yeah, I don't know. Seemed like a bad idea.
But I mean, this is what makes the global protocols a human rights issue, right? To your point, that they matter for the sake of exit, right? And I like to think about the example of like the medieval economy, where you had kings in different jurisdictions all issuing their own sovereign money, where they defined how much the money was worth, the unit of account, within limits, but within the money was precious metal, right? So they're issuing a coin. The
But
value
it's based on something.
it's
yeah,
based
not-
on a global
that
standard,
everybody
right?
agreed
And
on,
and
yeah.
so you can think about, a lot of people are like, well, why did the king have to put metal in the money? They didn't. It was there for, some barbarous relic or something. But no, it's more than that. The king is issuing an option on rebellion, right? You can take the money, you can take the metal, you can melt down the coin, you can give up the excess value in the coin, because when they mint the coin, it's worth more than the metal in it locally, right? But you can always take the metal and use it to, hire mercenaries to fight the king, and that was part of the negotiation around the legitimacy of the sovereign of the king, that the money they issued, they had the right to express a level of sovereignty because there was, this option for rebellion within it, this kind of global standard within it in terms of gold. And so again, that's that sort of multi-scale relevance. You need the kind of global protocol or the global standard, not necessarily just the interoperability standard, but also something that you can exit to, because you might be in a situation where you don't have a choice, right? Like, it's true that, okay, if you get to opt in always, then you can opt in, then your decisions have consequences, and if you opt into a shitty system, then that's on you. But when you're born, you didn't have a choice, right? You were forced into some system that you inherit, and so to be able to like have access to the kind of global layer from a human rights perspective so that you can exit, right? But that doesn't mean we shouldn't also then leverage that to enable the creation of sovereign systems that people can then choose to opt into for greater expression and scalability and so on.
So we should all rely on Bitcoin as
Absolutely.
digital
I think-
gold.
yeah,
and start
absolutely.
minting all our assets backed by Bitcoin.
Bitcoin maximalist to the core.
So we have identity. We have that we need a common protocol. We have money, that we need a global protocol. Now let's get to markets. So on markets, right? Yes, you can have local markets, and what we know from that is that they are very inefficient, right? You don't have the same price discovery when you have local markets, and it's easier to manipulate, right? Because you fragment the liquidity, and so you do want also a global market. And again, it's a protocol. I'm not talking that you need a state machine, like one specific state machine to run it, but we need a protocol where you can have global markets where everybody can participate, have price discovery. And so you need this set of like global agreed primitives that everybody can like customize and go to town with, but at the end be able to exit, be able to coordinate, and be able to kind of find and do price discovery.
I would, no, fully agreed. We want to have global standards, so especially from a user perspective, so that applications can easily roam between many different security models necessary. For example, right? Like, I agree it's kind of shitty. Like, imagine if I had to buy a new phone for every new country I visited. That would suck pretty hard. I'd be having a lot of phones very quickly. So you want to have this ability to have defined protocols that applications and users can interact with in potentially many different deployments.
Now let me ask you the hard question: how do we agree on such a protocol?
And I think
It's almost like we need some kind of consensus.
Yeah, I think another thing to like keep in mind is like global consensus is not always like binary. So it's not like everything gets ordered on Ethereum. So like the nice thing about like modularity is like you can have like different levels of trade-offs. So you have like full roll-ups that the ordering is decided by like Ethereum itself, but like you can also go down and realize like validiums, for example. If you want to have a like toy example of validium, like 3 of us could have a validium and like just agree on the ordering and just post like proofs to Ethereum. So like that's an example of like local consensus, but it's still like more secure than if we were settling on our own.
I would actually argue that right now Ethereum implements a sovereign approach really well, because we don't really talk about this as much, but like
multi-sig approach.
Most rollups are very sovereign, fundamentally speaking. They have very different levels of sovereignty. So I think actually, sort of, if you ask the L2 community, they're mostly sovereignists as far as I can tell.
I mean,
at least right now.
We get to like this part where like rollups are actual like extensions. That's something I'm like bullish on, like this idea of like having rollups as extensions of Ethereum, because I feel like the original like vision was to have like this trustless scaling solution for Ethereum, and then it would not make sense if I'm doing stuff on a rollup and I have to like trust some other community for like assets breached from Ethereum or like anything of that sort. And I think the issue with like sovereignty in general is it's hard to build up communities. Like the layers, like building layer 1s and layer 2s is actually easy, but like building like an actual layer 0 is like pretty difficult. So when you tap into Ethereum, you're tapping into this community that actually cares about like the validity of like one state transition. So like that's a question I would ask for like you in building like Cosmos and like Anoma and all of like, how do you bootstrap? What's your estimate? Like how hard is it to bootstrap a community that can actually secure things like that?
I think with Anoma, I'm very happy if Anoma only ever exists on Ethereum. It's a protocol. Like it's just a good intent abstraction, and the Anoma resource machine can fully run on Ethereum. And this would be great, right? Like if everyone globally wants to use Ethereum for their security, that's great. I am mostly thinking about this in terms of my parents. My parents will never want, like no matter how secure Ethereum is, because they don't understand, it's too far away from them.
Are you sure they're not using Near already?
No, they're like
Sweat Wallet.
Sweat,
we have some grandparents who are using Sweat
Nice.
Wallet for tracking their steps.
again, privileged position, but like my parents live in Germany, they trust the local government, right? So they will want something that is secured fundamentally by the local jurisdiction in Germany. And I just want to make sure that that their application, that they can easily switch from their local security to Ethereum security by sort of having agreed on the protocol definition.
But
And I think-
okay. Because I've heard this argument multiple times, and kind of I've been thinking about this. Like I don't think, I mean, maybe your parents are extremely into sovereignty and they inspect every layer of the stack that they're using when they're doing financial
Look
transactions.
what they produced.
Well,
Must.
yeah, I mean, maybe, yeah. But I'm just saying, like, more broadly about parents, I think generally they don't really care about what they're using, if it works, if it's cheap and accessible and fast. And so the question is really, like, can we achieve that and can we give that functionality to them?
So I would argue, especially older generations, really care. Because they fundamentally already don't understand how the internet works or how the global financial system works. And I think this was sort of the pitfall under Pax Americana. All our financial system is checkpointed into Pax Americana effectively at the moment, right? Like, if you use a financial system, if you use a MasterCard, you're checkpointed into the US government security. And I think a lot of Germans especially hate this. This is why cash adoption is still tremendously high in the country, because like you care about local infrastructure. And I think this is also something that really sort of the social media area showed, that it is not a good idea to give up large amounts of sovereignty towards any sort of global system. So we've tried this approach right now on this globalist approach to some extent, where like we all checkpoint most of our data into the US government. And I'm not entirely clear whether this is going to be long-term stable. Also from the perspective that like the financial system will stop working if we cut enough fiber cable. Like the US financial system will be fine, but like the German financial system, like the Res and Visa and MasterCard, is going to blow up as you lose more and more fiber connectivity over the Atlantic, right? So like this is the other aspect of sovereign systems. You want to be resilient in the failure of global connectivity.
But something is like, aren't there like advantages to actually having like a world economy, even if it's like denominated in the dollar? Like, what's the alternative to us like doing our own thing? I think this also like boils down to like the argument of using ETH as money on like roll-ups and stuff. That's also like very testy argument. Like, why not use my token as like money and so like, what do you think?
I think it's anti-fragile. This is really like if we have a single, like think of the financial system as relying on global consensus. Like I think about this in terms of World War III resilient infrastructure, because my assumption is that on the first day of World War III, we lose all satellite connectivity plus most of global fiber. At that point, I'd rather live in a world where my applications still work against the same protocol that I can now run locally. Because we've lost global connectivity, so that's gone, right? So we can't use this global financial system anymore. We must now have a system that allows people in Zug to still do commerce. And ideally, we don't have to rewrite the entire application stack. Ideally, this can be the same protocol.
Also, so the way Anoma is designed is like you can switch, if that makes sense. Like, how does Anoma's design, and I think I would pose this Ethan as well. So how does Anoma's design fit into this sovereign infrastructure, and same as Cosmos, how would you describe how the designs for protocols, how does it fit into the sovereign model? I think Illia will also ask for NEAR, how do your sense of globalism, how does it appear in the protocol as well?
As local as required, as global as possible. If you have global connectivity, great. Use a global.
So what kind of example application, no one in the audience knows what an example sovereign application would look like. What would that look like for you?
For example, let's assume in this room we can run an Anoma instance to do local settlement between all of us. I mean, we have to agree on some security setting for this, but then we can run this locally. But then again, if you want to interact with sort of Ethereum as a security model, we can then also interact, and we have connectivity to that consensus, that security model, then we can also use the same applications to interact on Ethereum using Anoma, right? This is sort of the idea that if we happen to live in a world where all of a sudden we lose connectivity to outside of this room, we can still have a functioning coordination system in this room.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're very early in the formation of these political economies around, sovereign and global blockchains. And the real question for me, it's not so much globalist versus sovereignty, it's how do we build systems that bridge these scales from local to global and back, right? How do we build the global system out of the composition of local systems, and how do we secure the local systems, from the global? So there's this reflexive relationship between them, and I think we're still trying to understand what that looks like, especially as we navigate, impending constitutional reform for the planet. I mean, just forget, I see the blockchains and what we're doing as the tools we need to support the, this transition that the whole world is going to have to go through now. The constitutional structures we have today are from the mid-19th century, right? The emergence of the Industrial Revolution, post-Napoleon world order, the end of the medieval period, all this sort of stuff. Limited liability, shareholder-based corporations, focus on nation states, right? And so all of that is being challenged now by silicon transistors, by the internet, by AI, by all these technologies that really question, and by hitting the limits of our biophysical reality, where the realization is starting to dawn on us that we are insufficiently representing the structure of the world in our institutions, right? And the world is both global and local, right? It's not one or the other, and you actually need both, and you need them for different kinds of conditions. You cannot organize effective defense at a strictly local level, right? It's a global concern, right? You cannot organize certain kinds of accounting at a strictly global level, but you also can't do them properly at a global level, right? If you try to say that all value can be denominated in USD, you're going to do something fundamentally wrong, right? Because it can't be. There's more to USD in the world. There's wheat, there's gold, there's minerals, there's oil, there's all these different things. You can try to collapse them all down into some expression in US dollars, but you're gonna you're collapsing information. It's a projection. It's a reduction, right? And so in my view, what we're trying to understand, we're right at the beginning of this thing, right? We have no idea where we're going yet. We're very early on. It's in the 21st century. I think this is the grand challenge is how we kind of reconceptualize the different functions of money and the tensions between them, right? And everyone is kind of obsessed with this store of value function, and maybe we're starting to see more development on the medium of exchange function with stable coins and so on. But we've left the problem of the unit of account, of how we do accounting, of what we account for, of where value accrues and flows, almost completely untreated, right? And that's a fundamental challenge for both globalists and sovereigntists of what do we actually value, and how do we account for that? And I think that's kind of what we have to figure out. I have no idea anymore how any of this relates to your original question, which I can't even remember. But this is what's important to me.
Yeah.
This is what I value as a sovereigntist. You're trying to set a global agenda here, and
So like, does this like relate to like design for Cycles money? We haven't like discussed that. Like, is this something?
yeah,
that
what's
plays-
Cycles money?
I don't know. I mean, I tried to like read through, and there was this like debt clearing system, and I'm like,
Hell yeah.
okay, this like looks like Buchman. So like, I was going to ask you, so like, how would you sell Cycles money to the audience as someone who's big on sovereignty?
Yeah, well, no, that's great. I mean, thank you for the segue. I appreciate the opportunity here. I mean, Cycles money is our attempt to take the next step in this, to move beyond just the store of value narrative and to start to think about the medium of exchange and the unit of account, and to move from just a quantity theory of money, which everyone is still obsessed with, to more a quality theory, right? To actually look at the graph structure of liabilities in the world, right? So much, everyone is focusing on the assets, on the assets are important. The asset side is important. Building counterparty-free assets, permissionless transfer. It's a fundamental human right issue, right? But the power of banking doesn't just come from the asset side of the balance sheet. It comes from the liability side. The fact that the bankers gather in clearinghouses every day and they clear huge amounts of debts between themselves without using any money at all, right? And the rest of us don't have any access to that kind of power. I mean, we can build our counterparty-free assets all day, but that doesn't actually unlock the power of banking for everyone else, right? And so what Cycles is about is doing that, is putting the power of clearing, the ability to clear the most money, the most debt with the least amount of money, in the hands of everyone, and using blockchains as a tool to enable that. It wasn't really possible to do that before blockchains. It's sort of the ultimate use case because it takes explicit advantage of the atomic multilateral settlement functionality of blockchains. This is something Anoma is very focused on, atomic multilateral settlement. That's really the killer use case, the killer functionality of blockchain. So what Cycles allows you to do is anyone who has a debt, and pretty much every payment is settling a debt, right? When you transfer someone money, it's to discharge a prior debt, right? Unless you're just like gifting them, right? But pretty much every other payment involves a debt. But those debts aren't really represented anywhere in a kind of blockchain database. And Cycles is allowing those debts to be represented so that we can clear them with less money, which unlocks huge power and potential for people generally, and allows us to start thinking about these sort of future questions. By surfacing the graph structure, we can start to reflect on the quality of the economic environment, not just the quantity of money, but the quality of the money, how it flows, the cyclic flows, and start to think about questions around units of account, what we value, how we account for it, and so on.
I would also add to this that one of the clearinghouses, right, there are central places where we do centralized clearing. In this kind of model, we can also do just peer-to-peer clearing. Like if two of us keep doing lots of transfers between each other, there's really no point that we clear our central point. We should rather clear directly between each other. And this sort of applies to larger and larger groups of people. That you want to do decentralized clearing, and I think this really, overall, this is why intents are quite nice, because they allow you to express this quite concisely.
Yeah, I mean, we took a different approach, kind of starting from the top and working to the bottom of the stack. And so Near started kind of as a single blockchain, but with a design of sharding, where you are able to kind of continuously grow the namespace, the account space, the block space, the state space of your blockchain. So you don't have the same limitations that you do in non-sharded blockchains, right? When they pretty much run on a single machine replicated. And that in itself is very useful because now you have, a space where you can register 1 billion users to actually have, an identity, have a balance, have, some applications. But at the same time, kind of from the start, we're realizing, you would still not want to have every single thing happening on chain. And so we have few projects that in the ecosystem that kind of taking the same approach, but now building it out kind of from there to, for example, do private shards or have peer-to-peer connections that you can use now this identity and payments as a settlement, but then have still local kind of settlement or pre-settlement or transaction or kind of peer-to-peer, payment channels to really enable kind of more local applications. So I think, and similarly, for AI, for storage, etc., you don't want to have, everybody to see the same data or the same inference, redo the same inference many times. You need some form of protocol where you pretty much can, request and work, make sure they done it, and if they don't done it, punish it globally to ensure that, everybody knows either, to not work with them or to lose money, etc. So that's kind of like a fractal approach that we're taking is like, what is the global consensus? And kind of we took it a little bit even further with chain signatures and chain abstraction, where we said actually, well, obviously there's other chains as well, right? This is what's happening anyway. So how do we actually abstract out all of this complexity that is happening across Web3 and make it easy for users to kind of facilitate transactions at any level and not worry about the specific route of this, right? And again, this is more of a movement that like all of us are united behind, but kind of building some of the kind of blocks there to enable this, be that multi-chain exchange or multi-chain lending, be that the token that's available on every chain at once, so you're able to transact locally and between chains, and et cetera, all of those use cases.
Yeah, and I think just like to Ilya's point, you can sort of like configure a global system to be sovereign in the sense of like if you have this one, if you run like a local, I mean like if you run like a local cluster that's still sort of like dependent on global ordering, that's also like sovereign in a sense. But then the point is, so for like Anoma's design helps you in the case where the global consensus doesn't even work and you actually need like local things to work. So it's possible to, like my example, have a Validium that's still doing Ethereum stuff, but that Validium cannot work if Ethereum isn't working. But like if you have like Anoma, like it could still work even if Ethereum wasn't working. Is that correct?
I think this is the approach that describes Anoma the best, which is in the happy path. Like Anoma is designed for the very, very sad path that ideally we don't go on, right? It is designed for this multipolar world order where currently we live in this like Pax Americana, happy times kind of thing, at least for...
Are they happy?
Times.
It depends on who you ask, but I think sort of for most people in this room, this was a great model, at least for now, and I think we are just like, the future is not going to be unipolar, it's going to be multipolar, and Anoma really is a sort of a protocol that is designed with this in mind, that the happy path of like having global consensus, having global connectivity may not exist, right? And I think in that sense, we took sort of the, like to some extent, a different approach on designing Anoma, which is, can we make sort of the system, the developer abstraction available on many different specific settlement layers like Ethereum, right? Like you can run Anoma on Ethereum, or you can just use Anoma on Ethereum, and you get all the benefits of global consensus on Ethereum. But we do not have to rewrite all the applications if global consensus isn't possible anymore for whatever reason. And we sort of like forced back into this local citywide consensus. The nice sort of fallout from this is that we also had to think about, okay, how do you do global multi-chain things? Because maybe your chain is local, maybe your chain is global on Ethereum, maybe Anoma is on Near, and so like how do you coordinate between these different systems? And like what kind of guarantees can you give users that maybe want to say, well, I don't actually care where I'm settled. Like I care that like I am fine with either Near or Ethereum, right? Like this is fine, and users can use Anoma to express this desire. And then whatever it's like, whether the user cares about fastest, cheapest, best price, they can just receive that intent, like the fill out to that intent, on whatever system offers currently the best price, right? And I think this is sort of the fundamental thesis behind Anoma, that we want to make a really good dev experience and user experience that abstracts away a lot of the complexities of like, well, this settlement layer or that settlement layer, and there's also capable of handling this like very terrible failure mode of not having global consensus.
Might I call it a chain abstraction?
Maybe.
Yeah, and I think so from like your point, and there are two things. So first, designing for the not happy case, that's like one. Because when you have like, so censorship resistance, privacy, all of that, there's this usual debate around like users don't care about all of that. And like users do care, but like users don't care enough, like in the sense of, it's a one-shot thing. Like if this something that happened tomorrow now, we would all suddenly like start caring about this. But like it's not going to likely happen tomorrow. And so like the need for that isn't near. Like cheap fast fees are like a more immediate need that I need to like solve.
More near need, yeah.
So like it's more, so like in the sense of like if you're designing for this thing that's supposed to happen like in some unknown future, how do you like designed for now. That's
So
like
even in the happy case, using an abstraction like Anoma or protocol like Anoma just gives you benefits because it gives you sort of this like application abstraction where you specify specific intent. You do not care whether this goes to DEX 1, DEX 2, or DEX 3, right? Even in the happy path, is like it effectively does state defragmentation, where you can have Anoma as a protocol, and like wherever the state lives, as a user, you don't have to interact with that specific system. You just specify sort of what specific state outcomes to what you want, under what guarantees, and then solvers sort of do the hard path. So even right now, even like in the happy path, there's just probably like an order of magnitude benefit here to just making like defragmenting state generally across these systems and making users and developers' lives easier.
I mean, maybe to try to explain it differently for Ethereum folks, this is to defragment liquidity, right, across all of the different chains and all of the different environments.
Yeah, the problem is,
and I think something else.
Sadly, all state is financial in our systems, but I still don't like only thinking about financial systems. It's like I tend to use state defragmentation, not liquidity defragmentation. But right now, they're pretty much the same thing.
And I think so. So for like, but at the same time, I mean, so what you've described is it works in the happy path, it works in the not so happy path. But then, if you're designing for the not so happy path, aren't there like trade-offs you're making that make it harder to design something that works in the happy path? Like this in Ethereum land, for example, there are certain things we're doing, maybe like trying to like prioritize censorship. We can't like there are no free launches. So like, how do you manage the fact that you still need there are still constraints you need to like solve for in the prison and stuff?
I don't know whether there are any. I mean, there are trade-offs in terms of having to start building against Anoma, right? Like it's a new paradigm. You do, like as a developer, you do have to do new things. So we can't do the super happy path of like the roll-ups are taking. I'm like, well, we'll just put this EVM on a single server, and like let's try to decentralize from there on out, right? So this is true. As a developer, you have to do more work, and as a user, there's lift involved here. This is never not going to be true. But actually, I think there's no fundamental tension between designing for the unhappy path and designing for the happy path in this case. It is just you have to think about the architecture quite a lot to begin with, so that like at least you keep the unhappy path in mind when you design your protocol, design your architecture, and hopefully this never happens. So I don't think there's a fundamental tension here between designing for the unhappy path, you make the happy path a lot worse by default. I think you just make your life harder as a protocol architect.
Yeah. Do you think we'll like benefit from so instead of leading with the more hardcore cyberpunk applications, we actually start with more like stuff people can use today? I mean, I've seen some applications for Anoma, like they have to do with like social media networks and maybe skill-free money and stuff. So like, can we like lead with that? Because something I usually have issues with, like starting from a practical sense, like privacy, for example, is really good, but like there are different levels of privacy. Privacy, I was just discussing with someone, like ZK voting is like very useful because if I want to vote for a proposal, like I don't want like Illia to know what I voted for, like I would like ZK voting, but like I may not like Tornado like cash level of privacy. It might be useful someday, but like it's not like immediate now. So do you think that there's advantage from leading with those kind of applications?
Absolutely. I mean, like most of the basic applications are going to revolve around trading because it's what everyone loves doing on these systems.
Are you making a meme coin, intent meme coin?
It could be intent meme coins. All of these things are clearly possible. I do think that a majority of the early use cases are going to be evolved around sort of fungible tokens, because intents are just very good abstractions of fungible token trading, right? Like, it is true that limit orders are intents. It just the inverse is not necessarily true. Like, not all limit orders are intents, but all intents are limit. Wait, I may be saying this.
All limit orders are intents. Yeah.
Yes, that way.
So actually, this is maybe to expand on that question of trade-off, because Anoma's design is pretty much a peer-to-peer way of relaying intents across different networks and solvers. And the alternative design could be that you have a single order book of all intents that is...
We can always make our life easier by having a single server.
Well, you can. I mean, you can have it replicated. You can have a super cool transaction DAG that is ordering transactions at the speed of light and GM. Yeah, so I mean, that's to the question of trade-off. I think that's an interesting, like, would that be a more efficient market, even though you would lose the property of this, World War III connectivity? Although,
Because I
It's
feel
fall
like
back to
because
it.
because
yeah,
I think
you can still fall back especially if it's a transaction DAG, for example, you can still fall back into it.
because I think like World War III is like a very small market, and I think that's like one issue.
Hopefully.
So like because like so another thing about like designing for like World War III is one, like, will blockchains actually be useful in that scenario, like in a war economy scenario, like are we still going to be doing
Of
this
course.
stuff? Then two, but like two, it's
I
like
mean, this is sadly talking from a person whose country is attacked. Yes, blockchain is very useful for a war scenario.
I come from like a country like where it's actually very useful too. But like I'm just like, what's the what's the target market? Like if you're funding these protocols, like if you fund these protocols, what's the ROI in a sense? Like
Don't think about this as like World War III must happen for this to be useful. This would be a terrible design. Think about this as this is just a more efficient design right now that like makes existing applications just much more composable, and that makes sort of the multi-chain world more composable. And in the multi-chain world, I also include the roll-up world, right? Like this makes us like we have many different systems. It just makes them more composable. It's an abstraction on top of existing systems. Like I can see a world where Anoma is deployed on something like Optimism and Arbitrum, and just helps users and developers interact with Optimism and Arbitrum as their specific settlement layer, right? This is, World War III is not a hard requirement.
I think the problem is you leading with World War III, and
Yeah.
that's where everybody gets stuck. You should say it was like, hey, this defragments liquidity across all chains, it
Precisely.
abstracts blockchains, and it's World War III compatible.
just happens that we thought about the
World War
unhappy
III,
path.
World War III compatible is like a very good like
Yeah.
tackler, by the way.
Remember Ilya's pitch, please.
That's why I interview everybody else, is then I can pitch for them.
All right, thanks a lot. We have time for 1 to 2 questions. If you're quick about asking them, raise your hand if you're interested.
Adrian, you differentiated between state fragmentation and liquidity fragmentation. What do you envision for state, like beyond liquidity?
Speak a little bit louder.
Can you? Oh, is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Adrian, you differentiated between state fragmentation and liquidity fragmentation. And I'm just wondering if you have a vision for, I guess beyond liquidity, what solving the fragmentation problem might provide for us.
Yeah, I hope that at some point we have more like state other than financial state on these systems.
I mean, maybe just example. Let's imagine you have an e-commerce shops, right, that have different, that like one run on Arbitrum, one runs on Near, right? They're selling kind of similar stuff. You want a way to just say, I want to buy thing. I don't want to choose which chain to go and pay there.
Isn't that liquidity?
I mean, everything is liquidity at the end, right?
But is liquidity real?
Yes, I hope over time we see like non-obvious financial, use cases that are at least non-obviously financial in nature.
Social graphs are
Social
good
graphs are a nice example. I would even argue that like credit clearing is a nice example because it's
That's
not,
still financial.
it is very financial, but it's at least
Definitely liquidity related.
I think
Liquidity
all
adjacent.
use cases are like
Promise
financial, but like
graphs.
there are ones that are not immediately financial in a sense. So yeah.
Kickstarter.
Liquidity.
Oh, like,
It's
like,
not
what,
like-
like
it's-
I
I
want to
don't- like it's- I mean,
please
like-
clean up I want to have like nicely maintained roads. To me, this is not financial in nature. I
Right.
want to be able to like fund public goods where me and a bunch of people in my community get together and say like, we'd like new parks, and I agree, half of it is financial in nature.
Yeah,
But
like,
at
I
least
mean-
the other half is a nice park.
Liquidity, like fine, there's a financial element, but I just mean like that there's something like
There's
bigger
the other
than
side
that.
of liquidity
It's
that
like
maybe not that liquid.
It's like financial and, right? Not just purely about
Local
liquidity,
parks.
right? Yeah.
Trees. Like
CO2. Not
All right.
liquid, it's gas.
Okay, one question, very, very quick, Patrick, very quick.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to the last gentleman's question. Take a look at some of our writing on multi-chat, which is a messaging application, which is not necessarily financial in nature, and also Promise Graph, which is a way for new type of organizations to coordinate with each other, which we're actually currently dog fooding.
Yeah, that was the one.
Right, let's bring our hands together. Excellent panel, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.